Father, here a temple in thy name we build. Ever may thy purpose in it be fulfilled. Circled by thy kindness and thy smile above, may it stand for worship, service, faith, and love. Here may all who enter feel thy presence near. Hear the Holy Spirit bring a message clear. Of thy Son, beloved, child and youth be taught, measured by his standard, character be wrought. May the sad find comfort, weary ones find rest. Here the sick and lonely be with friendship best. Strength for those who falter, faith for all who doubt. May thy love, O Father, bind this place about. God has guided us as a church for 150 years. But God's church has been around much longer than that, and there are those who have faithfully done His will along the way. To get a glimpse at God's grace and guidance in bringing Redeemer Baptist Church to where it is today, we have to start in Panton, Vermont on January 1st, 1817. It's on this date that a woman named Harriet E Bishop was born to Putnam and Miranda Bishop. Harriet was a Christian woman and took part in a course created by Catherine Beecher that prepared women to be teachers in the West. Harriet, equipped to be a teacher, was given an invitation by Dakota missionary Dr. Williamson to come to St. Paul. Harriet wrote a book called Floral Home, and in this book there was a chapter entitled Why I Came to St. Paul. Harriet quoted Dr. Williamson's invitation in full, and it reads as this. My present residence is of the utmost verge of civilization in the northwestern part of the United States, within a few miles of the principal village of white men in the territory that we suppose will bear the name of Minnesota, which some would render Clearwater, though strictly it signifies slightly turbish or whitish water. The village referred to has grown up within a few years in a romantic situation on a high bluff of the Mississippi, and has been baptized by Roman Catholics by the name of St. Paul. They have erected in it a small chapel and constitute a much larger portion of the inhabitants. The Dakotas call it Imijaska, white rock, for the color of the sandstone which forms the bluffs on which the village stands. This village has 5 stores, as they call them, at all of which intoxicating drinks constitute a part, and I suppose the principal part of what they sell. I would suppose the village contains a dozen or 20 families living near enough to send to school. Since I came to this neighborhood, I've had frequent 53 occasions to visit the village, and have been grieved to see so many children growing up entirely ignorant of God and unable to read His Word, with no one to teach them. Unless your society can send them a teacher, there seems to be little prospect of their having one for several years. A few days since I went to the place for the purpose of making inquiries in reference to the proposal of a school, I visited 7 families, in which there were 23 children of proper age to attend school, and was told of 5 more, in which 13 more that it is supposed might attend, making 36 in 12 families. I suppose more than half of the parents of these children are unable to read themselves, and care but little about having their children taught. Possibly, the priests might deter some from attending, who might otherwise be able or willing. I suppose a good female teacher can do more to promote the cause of education and true religion than a man. The natural politeness of the French, who constitute more than half the population, would cause them to be kind and courteous to a female, even though the priests would seek to cause opposition. I suppose she might have 12 or 15 scholars to begin with, and if she would have a good talent for winning the affections of children, after a few months she would have as many as she could attend to. One woman told me she had 4 children she wished to send to school, and that she would give boarding and a room in her house to a good female teacher for the tuition of her children. A teacher for this place should love the Savior, and for his sake should be willing to forego not only many of the religious privileges and elegances of New England 54 towns, but some of the neatness also. She should also be entirely free from prejudice on the account of color, for among her scholars she might find not only English, French, and Swiss, but Sioux and Chippewas, with some claiming kindred with the African stock. A teacher coming should bring books with her sufficient to begin a school, as there is no bookstore within 300 miles. Harriet wrote about her thoughts upon receiving this invitation in her book. She writes, "This was the first I'd heard of St. Paul, or even Minnesota, and the impression was at once riveted on my mind that I must go. And when, after 2 weeks of prayerful deliberation, the question was asked, 'Who will go to St. Paul?' I could cheerfully, though trembling, respond, 'Here I am. Send me.' Every possible obstacle was presented: the difficulties of the almost unknown route, the conditions of society, doubts as to the welcome by the people generally, the self-denials to be exercised, the privations to be endured, all of which were to me so many incentive to persist in my decision. In short, I came because I was more needed here than any other spot on earth, and because there was no other one in my class who felt it a duty to come. Friends violently opposed. Those who dare not oppose did not encourage, and vice versa. It was evident that all considered it hazardous and extreme, presuming on, yea, tempting divine providence. Only one said, 'Go, and the Lord be with you.' And thus, with no human aid on which to rely, the arm of the invisible was my support, and though comparatively ignorant of the world and its evils, I went forth to struggle with its waves, to tend to the unknown future, a path hitherto unexplored, a thorny maze, but with the certainty that, where thorns abound, roses often bloom. And their 55 sweet fragrances has refreshed me when weary, and been a sweet savour unto my soul." It was in 1847 that Harriet traveled by steamboat to St. Paul, Minnesota, where she was met with an old abandoned blacksmith shop infested with rats and snakes. And on July 18th, 1847, on the corner of what is now St. Peter's Street and Kellogg Boulevard, in that shop, walls built by logs and plastered with mud, Harriet started the first public school and the first Sunday school in Minnesota. Harriet's first class consisted of 9 students that spoke 5 different languages. She relied on one of her students that was fluent in French, Dakota, and English to translate her teaching. In less than a year, Harriet organized and raised money for a new building. It was a school, church, courtroom, and polling place. Sunday school with the students was going well, and the community wanted a church. So Reverend J.P. Parsons was sent to St. Paul upon Harriet E. Bishop's request to the Baptist Home Mission Society. Parsons served in St. Paul, and by the end of his first year, there were 12 members ready to organize a church, the First Baptist Church of St. Paul. Organized on December 30th, 1849 in the Jackson Street Schoolhouse, the few members of the church wanted a building of their own. They started working on it, completed the framing, roofed and enclosed the structure, but the construction was halted due to a lack of funding. In spring 1851, the pastor went east to raise funds for the completion of the church. During this time, money was borrowed. The church building was completed. When Reverend Parsons had raised the rest of the money needed to pay off what was borrowed, he became ill and did not attempt to return to St. Paul for many weeks. When he recovered, he started his journey back to St. Paul. But in New York, he was drugged, robbed, and left unconscious on the street. When his health returned, he took a boat for home, only to be found dead in his berth 2 days later. The first service in the First Baptist Church in Minnesota was a funeral for a man that suffered and died serving Christ. The First Baptist Church eventually started to create sister churches. First was the Pilgrim Church in 1863, which consisted of around 50 escaped slaves from Boone County, Missouri to St. Paul, traveling on the Underground Railroad at the height of the Civil War. Migrating by boat, the group called themselves Pilgrims. In 1870, many German families came to St. Paul to settle, and since there was no German Baptist church in the city at the time, the German-speaking people had settled with going to the First English Baptist Church. They had their Sunday schools held separately in a German language, and that formed the nucleus of the German church in St. Paul at the time. Prayer meetings were being held in the German language, and with a man by the name of H. Grucius acted as the leader. There was this longing that grew amongst the German families that had joined the group. They sincerely wanted a German church to be able to attend. The second daughter church was a congregation of Swedish people that left to form First Swedish Church on May 18, 1873. And on August 3, 1873, 150 years ago, the third daughter church to leave the First Baptist Church of St. Paul was the First German Baptist Church. The first pastor of the First German Baptist Church was Reverend H.J. Mueller. He worked at the church as the first pastor after he was ordained and worked extremely hard for 1 year. He lived in Hastings, Minnesota, and served the church there. He'd alternate church services, preaching in the morning at one church and in the evening at the other church. They said he had an evangelistic zeal, and he had a heart and a mind for missions. He saw a need for the German-speaking people in Minneapolis, and through his work many souls were won and people were baptized. By the end of his year there, he had doubled church membership from approximately 16 to about 30 members. It was 1875 when the first church building was purchased. It was located on Canada and 13th Street, in a very prominent residential section of St. Paul, 1881 to 1888. And during this time, there seems to be a very blessed relationship between the new pastor, Reverend Henry Schultz, and the church. He accepted the call to become the next pastor in 1881. He gave a lot of time, and he was known to be very strong and an energetic person that brought unity and spirit and peace among the members, with really great results. A lot of the members of the church lived across in the Riverview district. Transportation ended up becoming a problem. The Wabasha Street Bridge was the only bridge to come over the river. At this time, there was a horse-drawn carriage that would only cross the bridge on the hour. A decision at the time was made for the members that living in the Riverview district, they would become a new church and a new mission. They stayed in the Riverview district and became the First German Regular Baptist Church of West St. Paul, which is now Riverview Baptist Church. With the expansion of the First German Baptist Church to the Riverview district, there was quite the blessed and fruitful ministry by Reverend Henry Schultz. From the calling of Harriet E Bishop by Dr. Williamson through letter, to Harriet calling on Reverend J. Parsons, to the First Baptist Church of St. Paul, God used the gifts and talents and sacrifices of individuals to bring about the birth of a church that still is ours today.